Diary editor James Hill, and the journalist Afia Hagen. Thanks so much for joining us again. You've picked some cracking stories. Let's start, shall we, with the Sunday Times, because I always like a poll. So this one, this time, is saying that Sir Keir Starmer would beat Rishi Sunak in a poll to become, favoured leader of the government. 32% prefer the Labour leader.
Yeah. And this is obviously just about the two of them, not necessarily about the parties. But this was a seat-by-seat analysis, found that the Labour leader, so Keir Starmer, beat Rishi Sunak, in 390 constituencies in England, Wales and Scotland. And that was on the question of who would make the best Prime Minister. Of those 632 constituencies, the Prime Minister leads Keir Starmer in just 29 of them. He's the first choice in only 4, and that's when undecideds were factored in. So they could be the saving grace for Rishi Sunak. But I think it's probably a bit too late. And it's also notable that in the Prime Minister's constituency in Richmond, in North Yorkshire, Sir Keir Starmer was the favoured leader there as well. Not looking good.
James, what are your thoughts on these polls? Do the leaders take these types of articles seriously?
They really do, particularly when Rishi Sunak's whole pitch was that he was going to come in, he was more popular in the Conservative brand last year, and now what's happened is rather than kind of boosting the Tory brand up, the Tory brand has reduced the Prime Minister and sunk him in the ratings. Thing is, as this poll shows, Keir Starmer is not terrifically popular, but he doesn't have to be, frankly. He is reasonably disliked, but unfortunately for Rishi Sunak, his ratings are now as low as Boris Johnson's was when he left office. And of course that means that the Tory plan, which was going to be run an election around tax cuts, let's have a presidential campaign, makes it much more harder. And I just think that whatever way you look at it, it's going to be a very challenging year and a contest for the Conservatives, which is why we've seen these stories about different types of strategy, who they're listening to, Dominic Cummings, etc., because they know they're really up against it after a long time in government.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Well, let's see if Dominic Cummings really makes a return to number 10. We shall see. Let's move on to the Observer. And we know, James, lots of strike action within the NHS. It's been a real problem, hasn't it? Not only for people at home, but for the government, of course. And there are more junior doctor strikes ahead. But this strike, according to the Observer, will sink Sunak's NHS wait list vow, that promise that he made.
Yes, exactly. A year ago next week. And this is really based around the comments from Matthew Taylor, who's the chief executive of the NHS Confederation. He said that, without these strikes, it would have been difficult to hit this target, but we probably would have done it. But with these strikes now next week, the largest industrial action in NHS history, we're going to be unable to hit that target. And of course, that means people's experience public services, they're going to be experiencing that when they come to the polls, a sense perhaps that Britain nothing's working, etc., and they're unable to get the health service they need. And of course, at the end of the day, it's 65 weeks as a waiting time. It ought to be totemic, and the fact that we're unable to give people an appointment within a year really says a lot about the state of the NHS in the country right now.
Yeah, it's a real worry for lots of people, cancelled appointments, as we spoke about before. That's going to be such an issue. Not one of the main, but it will be there, won't it, in the forefront, Afia?
I think it probably will be one of the main issues, actually, because like earlier on we were talking about, those people that are on their cancer pathway and having their appointments cancelled 3 or 4 times. That's going to be a big worry for people, because so many people will know someone that has gone through that is going through that. People want to access the NHS free at the point of delivery that they pay for in their taxes, and they don't want it to be falling apart, which seems to be what it is at the moment. So I think this is going to be quite a big election issue, absolutely.
And I think in the coming week or so, we're going to see a real blame game where you're going to see people like Victoria Atkins, the House Secretary, talking about you need to get people back into work, the doctors back to work to help patients, and the BMA are going to be saying, hang on a sec, we haven't had a proper pay rise for 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And I think that the problem is when you have it in a context, as we've just discussed, when Rishi Sunak is so far behind Keir Starmer, the government doesn't get any political credit, and a lot of the blame goes towards the government. So I think in those circumstances, when the opinion's turned against you, particularly when it comes to NHS, which we know the British public love, it's very difficult to see how the government can make a case for the narrative in the weeks and months ahead.
Goodness me. Let's change gear then, shall we? Sunday Mirror, they've commissioned like a survey to ask the public what they think about the royal family, and we're hearing that this will then be told to the royal family, or senior members of the royal family? Feedback.
Absolutely. So this is the government, actually. They've been conducting the survey since May last year. We're going to get the results this summer. Biggest survey of this type ever conducted about the royal family. 175,000 people questioned. Each person given a £10 voucher for their time. And it's about exactly what the country thinks of King Charles, the royal family, the monarchy, what their purpose is. We've got some early indications of what those results are. So 90% of people questioned said that they'd heard of the coronation. 45% followed coverage on TV and radio. 8% attended local events, and only 2% attended national festivities in London and Windsor. One of the main questions is, what do you think should be the main role of the monarchy in the UK? And they had different choices to answer that question. So, undertake a constitutional role, give out MBEs and OBEs. We don't have any of those answers back yet, but a leak has suggested that we love a leak, don't we? Fewer than 1 in 4 people questioned thought that the royal family were hardworking, and only 1 in 10 think that they are good value for money. So this is a real litmus test on what the country thinks of King Charles, thinks of his reign, and thinks of the royal family at this time.
It'll be interesting, won't it, to see, because I was going to say Prince Charles. The King has always been about slimming down the royal family and having those senior royals take more of an important role.
Well, the key difference now is, of course, that a year or so ago we had the Queen on the throne, and she was seen as very much the focal point for popular support for the monarchy. Now, with her gone, the question, some of those hoary old issues about what the monarchy should stand for, how big it should be, as you say, should it be slimmed down, should it be Scandinavian type. And of course, remember, every sort of 20 years or so, there is a regeneration. There's a sort of question around the monarchy, and they had one after, obviously, with Princess Diana's death, because it's a new millennium.
And I had to double check there. Was I just watching The Crown, or did that actually happen? And it did, didn't it?
It did, yeah. Because they wanted, and they found that a lot of, actually, there was unpopular feedback about what the public thought about the monarchy, and they had to change, and they were under the surface, and that's what they're going to have to do, is try and change a little bit while giving the impression that they're a sort of bastion of continuity and stability in very fragmented political times.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it there. There is just one more story, James, if you could do it in 30 seconds.
Sure.
It's all about foreign students being put off coming here and studying in the UK.
So Rishi Sunak's big migration crackdown, as a result of that means it's more difficult to bring dependents if you're on a student visa. Now only postgraduates can bring them. And a lot of university vice-chancellors are saying it's going to put people off and going to cost us money.
Yeah, okay. Interesting story there. More of that to come. James and Afia, thank you so much for your time. We'll speak to you a little bit later on.